Hello there everyone, this is Seb and today I brought out my little buddies over here. And Grizo, who's chilling right off the side here for now. He'll probably be a nuisance later on, but we'll see and we'll deal with it when the time arrives. Anyway, I figured I wanted to make some more of these talking head videos in which I give some tips on collecting and particular CD-i of course. I find it is actually a really fun system to collect for. So I want to make some videos on why that is. But in this first one I actually want to warn of some pitfalls that might arise as well. Because yes, CD-i does have some. In this video we are going to take a look at some of those that relate to these games in particular. And why do I start with these ones? Well, because there's some activity lately. We of course just had the RZ release. A new game based on the action platformer CD-i Zelda games, so that's kind of current. And something else that happened is that this month someone went and found a new beta version of Hotel Mario, which had some unused cutscenes, well not cutscenes but audio. So that means that the YouTube poop masters will be hard at work in churning out some new content. And usually when these things go, public and get some attention, there are some collectors out there who want to seek these out. So for you, I want to point out some things that you really want to look out for when going after these games in particular. These 4 games are basically what has kept CD-i out of total obscurity, I guess. Because these are the main things that people know CD-i for nowadays. Which is in one way unfortunate in more ways than one. One, because CD-i has so much more to offer. But 2, because the prices of these things are just nuts. They are insane. First, let's talk about why would you even want to collect these? I think there's 2 groups of people who really want these games. First is people like me, collecting for CD-i. And it's part of the CD-i set, so obviously you want them, right? Now I was lucky enough to have a CD-i collection to begin with. I grew up with the CD-i, especially when the AVGN hadn't done his hit piece on CD-i yet. The prices were reasonably okay. You could still get Zelda's Adventure for 150 euros. After that hit piece, things skyrocketed, unfortunately. And that brings us to group number 2. And those are the people who are not necessarily CD-i collectors, but they are part of the Zelda fan base, or they just want to collect Nintendo curio. And I never really understood if they either buy them to add to their collection or if they buy them up to actually put on the pyre. It never made sense to me. They don't have a CD-i player. And they keep on going on about how terrible the games were, how they should have never been made, how big of a mistake they were, and oh yeah, I will pick them up for $2,000. What? How does it make any sense? But anyway, unfortunately, there is some interest outside of the CD-i group, which has really driven up the price. And let me dispel a rumor right out of the gate here. Because it's often said that these are rare. These are not rare, okay? This is really a situation in which demand very much outpaces supply. Especially these 3, Hotel Mario, Wand of Gamelon, and The Faces Were Evil. These were hugely successful for the system. So almost everyone who had a CD-i had at least one of these. Unfortunately, Zelda's Adventure was in developer hell for about 3 years, so that one came out a bit late, but it was still heavily promoted, and it was by no means a rare game. It sold reasonably well for CD-i. There is many games on CD-i that are much more rarer. And how you can tell is if you fill out on eBay one of these, any of these, or even all together, you will find dozens of listings. However, if you try to find, for example, this one, good luck. Making the Grade is one of those games or one of those titles. Well, it is a game. It's actually a really good game, by the way. But if you try to find this one, it might not cost as much as Zelda's Adventure, but you might end up looking for it for 5 years or longer. But I digress. Let's stick to these four for now and just explore like are there other ways. Like if your only reason to hunt these games out is to actually play them, do not collect them, okay? They are too pricey, do not. Just find the ROM, the ISO file, and just play it in the emulator. None of these use the DVC, so they should play decently fine on the emulator. And even if you have a real CD-i, then just burn the disc and play it. CD-i players can play CDRs just fine. There is no copy protection, so just burn the disc and be done with it. And that's your game, and you can enjoy them. And yeah, there is some enjoyment in there. If you want to actually get them, then my priority would be Hotel Mario, because it is by far the most fun and the most affordable. You can still usually find one outright buy for around $100, sometimes even below it, especially in Europe, which is by no means cheap, but you know, it's not outrageous. And it's just the best game out of the lot. It's the most fun, just pick up and play, good presentation, apart from those cutscene, but you know, they have their own charm in their own right. So yeah, that would be my priority to get if you want to actually collect them, apart from only playing them. Then there's these two, and these are, in my opinion, also good games. They are well built, they are fun, but they are a bit harder to get into. CD-i only has 2 buttons, which is really dragging these two down. But they are often misjudged, unfortunately, and a lot of things that people say about them is just not true. Like infinite spawning enemies, that's just not true. But I digress again, because there is a better solution for these as well, and that is the remaster of these games for PC, which is made by the same guy who made RZ, which makes these games so much more enjoyable and playable. So I highly recommend, if you're interested in playing these games, to hunt down that version, the remaster. I'll put a link down in the description where you can still find it. And just play it that way. It's so much better than hunting it down and pay. I think these will set you back like $200 now if you're lucky, per piece, right? So that's no good. In Europe you can find them for a bit cheaper, but there is some potential issues with that as well, but we'll go in that in a bit later. Then we've got this little bastard over here. This is not worth buying, okay? It often goes, especially in the US, for over $1,000. It's not worth it. It's the worst game by far. And part of it is just unfortunately that it has been stuck in developer hell for so long. Because it does have some neat ideas. Like, I love the graphical style in it, the claymation stuff, but it's compressed to such a degree that it's just gone to hell, and it's unfortunate. But it also suffers from big loading times. Every screen transition is just, I'm not kidding, it's like 5 seconds of loading, and the screens aren't big, okay? And the items, it just doesn't make sense. It's the least well designed game of the lot. And unfortunately it's the most expensive. So yeah, don't get that one. If you want to play it, just emulate it or play it on your CD-i as a CDR. And unfortunately, because these things are now worth so much, it has for years now gotten the attention of fakers or scammers making fakes. And this is my biggest warning for today. Be very careful. If you go out and you have every intention to actually get these games, be super careful that what you get is legit, because there's a lot of fake copies out there being sold as real. And I have nothing against reproductions, okay? Let's be clear about that. I think I get it. Like, you have a CDR, but you also want something nice on the shelf, so you want a nice box for it, right? So as long as a reproduction is made and it's clearly indicated that it is a reproduction, a reprint, then I have no problem with it. But too often these games are sold as legit and they are just not. Now, one thing that's interesting is that these games are kind of hard to make, and scammers are very lazy. They want a lot of money for the least amount of work. So, you know, for these games, you gotta make these inlays, the whole booklet, and the disc print. You know, that's a lot of work, so they don't do that. No, instead, what they do is make a white disc and they put a demo disc on it. And they look something like this, because yes, those do exist. You had these discs, which are, by the way, if you find a legit one, which can happen, they tend to be cheaper than the real one. Why? Well, because they don't look as nice on the shelf. And also sometimes the seller is under the impression that it's a demo disc, it's set for demonstration. So it's not the whole thing. That's not true, they are the whole game. These games were like more display pieces. They were sent to places where they had a CD-i kiosk. So in stores, in theaters, cinema, at the airport. You know, those are the kind of places where you could sit down, play some CD-i. Lovely. So they do exist, these kind of discs. So scammers saw that and they were like, oh wow, those are much easier to copy. So you very often see these kind of games. And I don't want to rag on resellers either, because oftentimes they just get that in a lot and they don't know it's fake. It would be nice if they did research every title, but oftentimes it's just not feasible. So that's the way you come in as the buyer to do your due diligence when checking out these type of games, because eBay doesn't take them down. Okay, they are reported, but it's just a matter of ignorance, I suppose, that it doesn't look fake enough, I guess. So how can you tell them apart? Well, let's start at the front here. These are half glossy, and those cheap disc labels, they tend to be like more rougher. It's also a sharp print. More easily that you can see in almost every picture is that the real discs, they tend to go with the label almost all the way into the center, where our CDRs tend to have a bigger gap. And there is still a rim of silver, which is also the case on the outside. There is a rather broad rim of silver visible. On those white blank discs, the label almost goes out to the edge. They barely have any rim left. So those are ways to spot it on the front. On the back it's easier because these demo discs, they are pressed, they are not CDR. So if someone turns it around and you see it's a CDR, it's like, oh, that's fake. Just immediate discredit there. Another way to spot if it's real or not is the inner ring. There is the code itself in the inner ring, but an easy way to spot a Philips press CD is that they always had these weird block things around the inner ring. Another thing to keep in mind is that these white discs, they were primarily used in the US because in Europe, oh, I'm sorry, Friso. In Europe, we actually most commonly had these discs instead, where they were silver. And again, these are pressed. Now, interestingly enough, something that you often see is a Zelda's Adventure in this white format. And as far as I know, that has never been released by Philips. So if you ever see a disc like this, but instead of Axis and Allies, it says Zelda's Adventure, it's most likely a fake, just because it has never been found in such a shape. In the US there was a disc like this, but it was a completely red label, not white. So another thing you want to be careful of is what they sometimes like to do is get a fake white label and then just put a red cover on top, and then it looks legit, right? So be very careful. People are mean. Now, we just had the example, however, which can happen, of finding a beta version. Hey there, Grizo. Are you getting bored? And beta versions, especially early ones, can come on CDR discs. Like, it can happen that developers had a build and they burn it themselves to check at home, for example. However, these are extremely rare and unlikely to just randomly find. And just to give an example, I have over here a beta version, and this is a late beta version, but it's a beta nonetheless of Myst. And look, it's also pressed. So usually Philips was very good at just pressing most of their releases. Now this version was also, I think, sent to publication and such. But you know, it's good to keep in mind that usually these demo things, the demo disc always, but also some of the early releases, the beta versions, oftentimes these were pressed discs. But yeah, it is possible that there are some CDRs out there, and usually these are in the hands of the actual developers. And yeah, they can bring them to the thrift store, and someone might be lucky and find them there. But if you find some obscure disc of, mainly the ones they want to do most is Wacky Worlds with some version number, most likely that is fake. Just look it up. If it's a version that has already been discovered and it's a CDR, it's usually fake. Also good to know that usually these CDRs, they are very not fancy, okay? They're just a CDR with a paper sleeve in there, usually with a quick scribble on there on what it actually is and the version number. They don't have fancy boxes, okay? Sometimes you see Wacky Worlds in a fancy box, like, oh, this is a prototype version. No, you just copied that ISO. So yeah, do keep that in mind. I want to go to my games, Grizo, and you're in the way. Oh god, hair everywhere. If there's one collection tip I have for you, is don't get a cat. Cats are awesome, but they don't merge well with collections. Well, they merge well, but they make a mess of things. Oh, you're cute, buddy. You're okay. You're just annoying sometimes. So yeah, be on the lookout for those CDRs. Don't trust them. And yeah, it is very possible, that being said, that there are still some undiscovered CDRs out there. Maybe even one for Mario Takes America. Maybe even one for a very, very, very early prototype build of the Donkey Kong game. Who knows? Who knows? Probably not. But one can hope. One final thing to keep in mind when hunting down these two games in particular, well, Hotel Mario 2 actually, is the version differences, or not version, the variants for the different regions. Because this is a complete copy in Europe. However, if this is a US copy, which this is not, but the US jewel case copy comes with a slipcover, which is a neat one. I should actually get one to show you. Way to not be prepared, Seb. Anyway, this is a US game, or game kinda, Max Magic, and this is what a complete US copy looks like. They have this slipcover over the jewel case. So if you want a complete copy, it should include this one. And these things are actually great because they tend to make sure that the actual jewel case remains in good condition. Although, you know, they are jewel cases, so you can, of course, replace those, especially the fronts. And the same goes for the Zelda games. In the US, they came in a jewel case. This is again a European later release, and in the US it would have a slipcover that went over it. Same for the Wand of Gamelon. Zelda's Adventure never came out in the US, so that never has a slipcover. So just to note if you are hunting down a complete cover. Something else in particular to look out for in Europe if you are buying these games. Over here I have 3 versions of the Faces of Evil. 1, 2 and 3. Now 2 of these are the same. Can you tell me which ones? Now if you said 1 and 3, the ones I just got, then I'm sorry to say but you are wrong. In fact, these 2 are the same. Why? Well, because they are both Dutch. And you might have spotted it, but it's kind of hard, especially from a distance like that. But yeah, these are both Dutch, and you want to be careful with that, because if you are hunting down an English copy and all of a sudden you get something like this and you put it in there and
Ich packe sofort meine Sachen.
it might not be what you were looking for. Sometimes the subtitle is translated to English. The one thing that doesn't, however, change to English is the sub over here. That is still in Dutch, which is a way to spot it, the difference. However, especially in particular this one here, like the contrast is so low, it's super hard to see. So there is a better way to check this out, and that is to check out the catalog number of the disc. And I say the disc because that's another thing that some sellers want to do, because obviously a German or French version has less value. So what they want to do is put it in an English case but actually give you a different disc. So always, if you are hunting these down in a particular language, ask for a picture of the disc, which will show you the catalog number right at the bottom there. And I'll put a list on the screen with the ones. It's the first 3 numbers that you really want to be careful of, and want to make sure that you have a match there. So yeah, that's another little pitfall concerning these games. But yeah, that's about it. I'm curious to hear from you. Like, have you had any experience with these games? Have you ever seen them up for sale where you was like, wow, that's a lot of dough? Have you actually bought them, or are you looking to buy them? Are you interested in collecting these? What are your stories surrounding these? I'd love to hear it. And do you have any other tips to look out for when it comes to these games, and some sleazy tactics that you've come across? I'd love to hear it, guys. And yeah, that is it for me for now, I think. I thank you so much for watching. It was a pleasure. And I do hope to see you soon again in another video. One of mine, one of yours. And until that time, I say, the muzzle.